It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our conversation today around cultivating good green jobs for young people in Africa. My name's Miles Gilliam. I'm with my colleague Fred and Jehu, and we're interviewing today Qobo Mayisa, who is one of the consultants from Pragmaleaf Consulting, who led the research on green jobs in Africa. So welcome, Qobo. Really good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Fred.
We are really excited to learn a bit about this research. You're going to be taking us through two of the main areas, but maybe in these sessions to come. But maybe just give us a little bit of the background around the purpose of the research before we get into the details.
Thank you, Miles. So this research sought to find evidence of existing successful green job creation initiatives for young people in Africa, and drawing from initial policy recommendations from an earlier study that we had done. The study looked at green job creation initiatives that are existing, that have emerged from African thinking, communities, and resources. Now, the case studies were done in 4 thematic areas of climate-smart agriculture, sustainable construction, ecotourism, and recycling. The case studies were in a couple of African countries: Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, and Zambia. Now, the key research questions that we were asking is, what are the best examples of green jobs that are being created for young people in the African continent? We were looking at what are the components of these success stories that we find on the ground, and what principles can be generalized from these case studies for those implementing similar work in Africa. And we were also looking at the policy frameworks, what policy asks can be generalized from the case studies for those advocating for green jobs. So examples of good policy, examples of enabling policy, as well as examples of policy barriers that are there, and what are the lessons that can be learned from there. We were asking ourselves, how is the African thinking? Because we wanted to see how is the African thinking coming out in terms of culture or theology, philosophies, values, and how do these contribute to the success of the innovations that are these case studies? And finally, what are the questions that come from what we've found on the ground? Do we identify any gaps? Are there any areas for further research? So those were the key research questions that we were asking.
Great, that's very exciting. But now, jobs. I mean, why jobs? I mean, we know Africa is one of the youngest continents in terms of there's an explosion of young people on the continent. Our demographics are changing. The rest of the world is getting a bit older. We're getting younger. But why jobs, and why specifically green jobs?
So the scenario in Africa regarding youth unemployment is quite grim, if I could use that strong term. 70% of the African population are youth below 35, which is really exciting and presents great opportunities for the future. Unfortunately, more than 12.4 million youths across Africa are unemployed. 95% of the youth are in informal employment, which means that 53.5 million or so, which is about 20% of the young people in Africa. And this is a growing figure. It's changing on a daily basis as young people grow and mature. Over 53% of these young people are not in employment, they are not in education, and they are not in training, so they're neat. And the employment rates are quite high, generalized across the different regions. For example, 9% unemployment rate in sub-Saharan Africa, whilst an extremely high 30% unemployment rate in Northern Africa. It all points at a picture of scenario where we have to create jobs for young people. But these have to be green jobs. These have to be, sustainable jobs. And so we then looked at how can we define what is a green job? And the definitions that we derived are, for example, from the United Nations Environmental Program that defined, green jobs as a subset of employment in the environmental sector that meets decent work requirements. Now, that's just, confined just to the environmental sector. It includes perhaps positions in agriculture, manufacturing, research and development, things like administration, service activities aimed at, preserving or restoring the environment quality, and that these jobs help to protect ecosystems and biodiversity. They reduce energy use, the use of non-renewable materials, they reduce water consumption, and improve efficiency. They help with efficiency strategies that help decarbonize the economy and minimize all forms of waste and pollution, which is where what we're discussing about sustainable construction and recycling comes in. Now, what about decent jobs? How would we define that? We define decent jobs as encompassing opportunities for women and men to obtain productive work in conditions of freedom, equality, security, and human dignity, in which women and men have access on equal terms. And that's a definition from the International Labor Organization. So when we're looking at decent work, then, we're looking at these 6 components. Secure employment, is it sustainable? It's not just one-off. Fair wages, we could say fair incomes. Are the people engaged in these jobs getting good incomes? Are they getting a living wage, or even better, safe working conditions, which is very important because a lot of these people are self-employed. The social protection, what social protections are provided in these jobs or in these occupations? Social dialogues, are there spaces or platforms for that? And finally, looking at labor rights and, labor standards, because they have to apply, in the green job sector as they would apply in all the other sectors. Now, there are certain skills that we're also looking at promoting or looking for regarding green jobs, perhaps also green life skills, because it's the whole green economy movement should be a lifestyle. So we're looking at green life skills, and we're looking at what skills will be required for that transformation to move from from the current unsustainable economies to a low carbon economy. So when we're looking at the skills for the green jobs, when we're looking at the young people and saying, what kind of skills would they need? You're looking at skills, surprisingly, like business skills, entrepreneurial skills. You're looking at embracing technology. You're looking at things like, financial literacy, financial skills, environmental knowledge and awareness. Even, technical skills like project management, because most of these young people will be running, projects. And these are some of the key skills, softer skills like, gender empowerment skills. Those are some of the things that you would want young people to have as they move into green jobs. Now,
and this sounds quite exciting because on one level, we've had a history in Africa of exploitation, and the economy is often an extractive economy, both from people and the environment. So the environment's been destroyed, people have been used. And so what you're talking about here, jobs with dignity and sustainable jobs, seems to be able to kind of deal with those historical issues that we've had. But also looking forward, it looks like the rest of the world is dealing with the climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, but their economies seem to be struggling with the concept of changing to a way that they could actually work. Do you think that Africa actually has the potential to lead in this area? Is this sort of a green economy because of the particular strengths we have of young people and maybe being able to start from a fresh base. Could we actually be the world leaders in what you're talking about, creating jobs with dignity, creating jobs that are sustainable?
This is a huge opportunity for Africa. It's a huge opportunity for Africa to create an African economy which is sustainable. I mean, this is what we were asking when we were looking at these jobs. We were looking at the pillars of sustainability. We were asking the question, do the green jobs create sustainable incomes and contribute to value chains that are sustainable? Socially, we were looking at the social impacts of the projects or the businesses that we looked at. Does the work contribute to well-being, community cohesion? Do they lift people out of poverty? Does this empower young people, youth, and women? Does it build on rather than violate the local culture? And definitely on the environment, we're looking at, how the projects contribute positively to environmental sustainability, climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. And these are real issues that Africa faces right now. And so we sit at a position of great potential and opportunity for us to start, creating the economies that are going to sustain Africa well into the future. And, that will balance the economic, the social, and the environmental well-being of our society.